Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy, encouraging you to be a writer today, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It's Julie here from the Story a Day podcast, and I have been getting a lot of email recently, a lot of messages from people. So I've been sending out a lot of email as well, responding to them. And some of the things that come up as I ask people to tell me what it is that's holding them back from taking the next step in their writing. And there's a couple of things that come up all the time. You may recognize them. So I'm going to talk about them today briefly and just try and give you some ideas of how to approach anything that might be stalling you in your writing. So the first thing that comes up is basically focus. Right? People tell me they don't have time, or they tell me that they are too busy, or they don't have, they can't get their mind off what's going on in the news, or they can't decide which project to work on. So it comes down to focus. How do we make ourselves focus on our work? It's also this lack of focus is closely tied to the second thing which people tell me about. They say things like, I can't force myself to sit down and write. I start writing and then I think I'm not good enough. I think I'm too old or too young. All these insecurities and fears that come up when we sit down to write. And it all basically comes down to fear. Focus ties into this as well, because if we're worried and insecure and not confident in our talents, our skills, our right to have a say in the world, then of course all of the focus issues come rushing in. And when a notification goes off on your social media that somebody sent a message, you hop over and do that because you don't have a clear sense of the importance of the work you're doing, your right to do it, and that you can do this, even if it's imperfect. So first of all, I want to assure you that everybody at every stage of the writing life feels this way. Everybody worries that they're not going to be able to do it this time. Everybody worries with every new project that they're not doing it right, that it's amateurish and it's never going to be good. And this is why Anne Lamott talks about the shitty first draft. This is why writers have friends that they hang out with on Twitter and they commiserate with each other. This is why writers show their work to people before they ever send it to a publisher, because we never really know. We never, ever really know if what we have pulled out of our head and put down on the page matches up with our expectations of what we were trying to do. So first thing, if you are insecure about your writing, if you're unsure if what you're writing is any good, if you're unsure that your message is worthwhile, you are not alone. And you may just have to learn to live with that a little bit, okay? It's okay to feel that way. So that's the first thing. Then it's very, very important to convince yourself that you have this right to write. You have something to say, which you do because you have a lifetime of experience and you're the only person who's ever lived that life. So your perspective on the world is unique and important, and you need to be able to talk about it. And if you want to be writing, then you should be writing. If you keep coming back to writing and you keep coming back and making a little bit of progress and then getting stalled by any of these things, fear or focus or anything at all, I have some suggestions for ways that you can commit in a small way to doing your writing. So some of the things that came up for people in terms of focus were things like they get distracted by social media and the news. So one of the suggestions I made, something that I've been doing myself, is really and honestly not looking at the news until the evening. So I do all of my work, everything I have to get done in the day, I preserve my energy for that. And I really care about current events. I'm very opinionated, I'm very vocal, I like to know what's going on, and I like to get as many perspectives as possible. So what I'm trying to do is, instead of like jumping and twitching every time something happens, I'm turning off all the notifications. I'm forcing myself not to go online, not to go on social media as much as I possibly can. And I allow myself an hour after dinner when I can dig into the news and I can dig into the memes of the day and whatever's happening, and I can sit there and I can rant about it, and I can, I can figure out how I feel about things, and then I stop and I go hang out with my family. Some of the ranting happens with my family, so that's kind of fun. But then we stop at some point. We're like, okay, I'm sick of hearing myself talk about this. So if you can force yourself to protect your creative energy by turning off the news, turning off all the notifications on your phone, except for anything that's life-threatening. Like, I will get messages from my children, they can pop up. But there are times when everybody else is muted. In fact, currently everybody else is muted because I'm recording a podcast. And this is something that you would do if someone was paying you in a job, right? If somebody was paying you to do a job, you would be expected to focus and block out all distractions for a certain amount of every day and focus purely on your job. I'm going to invite you to bring that kind of discipline to your writing, not all day, but for as long as you can manage. And feel free to start with a small window of time. Set a timer for 15 minutes and commit to not looking at anything but your writing. Maybe read over something you wrote before, or work on a story that you've been working on and stalled on for 15 minutes. And as you get used to that, you can up it to 25 minutes and 35 minutes and 45 minutes, but I wouldn't go beyond 50. You can work beyond 50, but productivity and behavioral science experts have proved that 50, I think it's actually something like 52 minutes is the figure they landed on, but it's round about that 50-minute limit. You start to become less productive. So set a timer for 50 minutes. I hate doing this because I hate getting interrupted, but if you get up and stretch and move around a little bit and then come back to it, you're actually going to be more productive. And the reason I say start with a shorter timer is that it's always helpful to get a win, right? It's always helpful to set a goal and reach it and exceed it. It's much more helpful than to set a lofty goal and come close to it but not quite meet it. It does different things in our brains. We celebrate ourselves for exceeding a goal. We're hard on ourselves for not meeting a goal. Even if in real terms you get more words written when you wrote for longer and didn't meet your time goal, even though you got more words written, it doesn't feel like a win as much as the other way around when you set a lower goal. So that's how I fool myself into writing. Something else that somebody said to me was that they're having tech woes. A couple of people told me they're having tech woes. So either their laptop's broken or they're having to share technology with other people in the house now because everybody's at home. And so that makes it difficult for them to write just whenever they want to. Somebody else was commenting on the fact, in fact, several other people were commenting on the fact that they are working now in their houses and they're working in the space that was previously sort of carved out for creative work, and now they're working at their computer all day there and dealing with work stuff and work stress, and they just don't want to come back to that space, and they don't want to stare at a screen again in the evening when they've got time to write. This is something that, as someone who's worked from home for a very long time, I've learned that you have to manage. You can manage this by making sure that you change things up, and whether that's having another space that you can go to. Some of us have the luxury of having a different space we can go to. If you only have the one space, maybe you have one desk and you can't see how you could possibly rearrange or grab a different space in your abode, there are some things that you can do. First of all, you can turn off the computer and shove it away. You can handwrite. Every single story that was ever written down until the 1880s was written on paper. Humanity has done it for most of its history. You can probably do it too. As somebody who grew up doing a lot of handwriting because I am that old and we didn't have computers. Word processors were sort of novel. I did most of my writing by hand. So here's what I learned going through university, writing everything by hand. Write double spaced, write on one side of the page. My little eco heart breaks to say that, but you're not wasting paper because what you're doing is you're leaving space for yourself to go back in and make notes and corrections. And when you're writing freehand, rather than using a typewriter or rather than using a word processor, I should say, you are going to get new ideas as you write a section. You're going to get ideas about the section you just wrote. And it's good to have those extra lines and the back of the page to go in and go, okay, this section needs to move, or, oh no, she's going to actually say this instead. So handwrite and double spaced, one side of the page, and just try that out. You don't need a computer to do this. If your hand gets sore when you write, work on developing a loose and easy, maybe italic style of joined up writing. You won't probably have been taught this in school. You'll have either been taught just printing, which you have to do, kind of just individual letters, or you'll have been taught some loopy, exhausting, illegible cursive style. I advocate developing a non-loopy but joined up, kind of slanted, fast style. And you can do this even as an adult. You can change your handwriting. There's a series of books by Barbara Getty and Inga DeBay. They're called the Getty DeBay handwriting series, italic handwriting series. I got them for my kids. We spent a summer all working on our handwriting, just going through the exercises, learning how to join up our letters very efficiently. And all of us now have a fast. I mean, it's the style I was sort of taught with at school, but my kids have now unlearned the version of cursive they were taught at school and learned this very simple, fast style where you can hold the pen lightly, your hand doesn't get sore, and you can write almost without thinking. So that's what I recommend if you're looking to get away from your screen. If you really like to write on a screen and you still just have this problem of I'm in the same space I was working in, there's a bunch of things. We had this discussion in the Superstars group, and there's a bunch of things that people came up with. One was simply to pack up everything related to your work and stick it in a tote bag or a satchel or a briefcase or something at the end of the workday and pop it over to the side where you can't see it. So all of your folders and whatever you use when you're on your computer and talking to people at work, pack all that stuff up in a bag, tuck it under the desk or somewhere you can't see it, and then reset your desk for your writing. Maybe grab some knickknacks or a scented candle or something that inspires you and makes your desk look like a different place. You could put a tablecloth down or hang a blanket on the wall, that you only put up when you're working on your creative stuff. Other things people have done is just like shift to the other end of the desk or shift your angle on the desk, so you're just looking out at a slightly different perspective on the room. This is your writing perspective. Other people have put carved nooks out of a different room in the house by moving a bookcase and then tucking a chair in behind it, and that's their new writing space. And just make sure it's got good lighting. Lighting's another thing you can use. If you work all day in one position, go away, go outside, get some stretching, do some Tai Chi or Taekwondo or some whatever Qigong, whatever you can do, juggle, whatever you can do to move your body, and then come back in and change the lighting in the room. So if you're using an overhead light during the day, get some little mood lighting desk lamps and just change the ambience of the place. Listen to a particular soundtrack to get you into the zone of being in your creative space. Create soundscapes, lightscapes, whatever you can do to change the place where you're working so that you forget it's also the place where you're staring at a computer for work. These things actually can be quite powerful in signaling to you that it's okay. Other things you can do is you can, if you sit down at your computer all day for work, try standing up to write. If you don't have a standing desk, not everyone does, you have books, right? I know you have books. Make 2 piles of books, grab an old shelf, stick them between them and put your keyboard on that and just stand. Now you'll need to stretch probably because your monitor probably won't be at the right height. So, take care of yourself physically and make sure you're stretching and rolling out your neck and looking up and up occasionally so that you don't cause yourself an injury. by not having everything ergonomically perfect, but even just standing up. I'm standing up now to record this podcast, right? It gives you a different perspective on things. Another thing to do if you don't want to stare at your computer all day is try dictating your stories. You'll have varying degrees of success with this depending on what software you use. Not everyone's got the expensive Dragon Dictate, which you can train to understand your accent or the way you talk. But even, Google Docs and native dictation software in laptops has got so much better over the years. So you can try dictating your story. You can record it into your phone and transcribe it later. There's a great service called otter.ai, which will transcribe audio recordings. And there's another one called Descript, which will transcribe audio recordings and video recordings quite effectively. So you can try that, and I think you'll find it's interesting if you try that to see how telling a story changes the way that you compose. Writing and speaking tend to produce different kinds of stories and different ways of speaking. I was also talking to somebody in the Superstars group who said that they were typewriting stories. And during the Story a Day May challenge, she was typewriting all of her stories, and they were like, she was making them last a page, and she found that it changed the way she composed because it slowed her down, made her think about the words differently. She didn't want to have to go back and correct things, so it forced her to just keep moving forward. So here's a whole bunch of things that you can do if you're making excuses about why you can't write based on your technology or your not being able to focus because of your space. None of this is a cure-all, right? I'm not telling you it's going to suddenly become easy to write, but there are lots of things you can try to mix things up when you find yourself frustrated with your lack of ability to work. And when I was talking about packing up your desk after work to make a new space for your writing, it's entirely possible that you just need to clear your desk off. Now, we all know that clearing your desk can be a wonderful way of procrastinating and not writing, telling yourself you have to alphabetize your books and sharpen all your pencils, and that kind of takes up all of your writing time. But there is a certain amount of power to clearing off your desk. Just throw away all the old paper, take all the dirty cups down to the kitchen, clear a nice space for yourself where you feel that expansiveness. If you can if you can take stuff down off the wall in front of you and have a blank wall to stare at, that might be good. Or put something up that inspires you in front of you. So those are some of the suggestions that I was giving people and some of the suggestions that we've been coming up with in the Superstars group. I would love to hear what you've been doing recently or in the past to help yourself get more creativity into your life, get more writing time. Maybe you've done something really creative with making a writing space for yourself. Love to hear about that. So if you come over to the blog and leave a comment on the post associated with this podcast, there'll be a link in the show notes. I would love to hear what you're doing to help yourself focus, overcome fear, become more productive, more creative, and happier as a writer. Because regardless of any external success, whether we're publishing or being read by anybody, most of our writing time is spent in our own heads. And anything we can do to make that a better place, I highly support. We want to be happy while we're writing, even though it's not always easy, and even though we're not happy every moment when we're writing, that fulfillment from writing is hugely satisfying. And I don't want physical or external distractions to stop you from doing the wonderful creative work that you have to do. So please keep writing. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week, and of course, keep writing.